Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I do these readings twice a week from various classics. If you subscribe to my free Substack newsletter at ravensview.substack.com, you'll get notified of the next episode and can leave your comments or suggestions. And you can also browse in there my flash fiction writings or musings on the world. I will be reading to you from Very Good Jeeves. It's a collection of short stories written by P.G. Wodehouse in 1930. Jeeves, a very competent valet, and his hapless employer Bertie Wooster were characters in dozens of short stories by Wodehouse. The stories are told from the point of view of Bertie. Jeeves and the Love That Purifies. There's a ghastly moment in the year, generally about the beginning of August, when Jeeves insists on taking a holiday, the slacker, and legs it off to some seaside resort for a couple of weeks, leaving me stranded. This moment had now arrived, and we were discussing what was to be done with the young master. "I had gathered the impression, sir," said Jeeves, "that you were proposing to accept Mr. Sipperley's invitation to join him at his Hampshire residence." I laughed, one of those bitter, rasping ones. "Correct, Jeeves, I was, but mercifully I was unable to discover young Sippy's foul plot in time. Do you know what?" "No, sir." "My spies informed me that Sippy's fiancée, Miss Moon, was to be there. Also his fiancée's mother, Mrs. Moon, and his fiancée's small brother, Master Moon. You see the hideous treachery lurking behind the invitation? Obviously my job was to be the task of keeping Mrs. Moon and little Sebastian Moon interested and amused, while Sippy and his blatant girl went off for the day, roaming the pleasant woodlands and talking of this and that. I doubt if anyone has ever had a narrower escape. You remember little Sebastian?" "Yes, sir." "His goggle eyes, his golden curls?" "Yes, sir." I don't know why it is, but I've never been able to bear with fortitude anything in the shape of a kid with golden curls. Confronted with one, I feel the urge to step on him or drop things on him from a height. Many strong natures are affected in the same way, sir. So no chez Sippy for me. Was that the front doorbell ringing?" "Yes, sir." Somebody stands without?" "Yes, sir." Better go and see who it is." "Yes, sir." He oozed off, and to return a moment later bearing a telegram. I opened it, and a soft smile played about the lips. "Amazing how things happen as if on a cue, Jeeves. This is from Aunt Dahlia, inviting me down to her place in Worcester." "Most satisfactory, sir." "Yes. How I came to overlook her when searching for a haven, I can't think. The ideal home from home. Picturesque surroundings, company's own water, and the best cook in England. You have not forgotten Anatole?" "No, sir." "And above all, Jeeves, at Aunt Dahlia's there should be an almost total shortage of blasted kids. True, there is her son Bonzo, who I take it will be home for the holidays, but I don't mind Bonzo. Buzz off and send a wire accepting." "Yes, sir." "And then shove a few necessaries together, including golf clubs and tennis racket." "Very good, sir. I am glad that matters have been so happily adjusted." I think I may have mentioned before that my Aunt Dahlia stands alone in the grim regiment of my aunts as a really good sort and a chirpy sportsman. She's the one, if you remember, who married old Tom Travers, and with the assistance of Jeeves, lured Mrs. Bingo Little's French cook Anatole into her own employment. To visit her is always a pleasure. She generally has some cheery birds staying with her, and there's none of that rot about getting up for breakfast which one is so apt to find at country houses. It was, accordingly, with unalloyed lightness of heart that I edged the two-seater into the garage up at Brinkley Court and strolled round to the house by way of the shrubbery and the tennis lawn to report arrival. I had just gone across the lawn when a head poked itself out of the smoking-room window and beamed at me in an amiable sort of way. "Ah, Mr. Wooster," it said. "What ho!" I replied, not to be outdone in the courtesies. It had taken me a couple of seconds to place this head. I now perceived that it belonged to a rather moth-eaten septuagenarian of the name Answitzer, an old friend of Aunt Dahlia's late father. I'd met him at her house in London once or twice. An agreeable cove, but somewhat given to nervous breakdowns. "Just arrived?" he asked, beaming as before. "This minute," I said, also beaming. "I fancy you'll find our good hostess in the drawing-room." "Right," I said, and after a bit more beaming to and fro, I pushed on. Aunt Dahlia was in the drawing-room and welcomed me with gratifying enthusiasm. She beamed too. It was one of those big days for beamers. "Hello, Ugly," she said. "So here you are. Thank heaven you were able to come." It was the right tone, and one I should be glad to hear in others of the family circle, notably my Aunt Agatha. "Always a pleasure to enjoy your hospitality, Aunt Dahlia," I said cordially. "I anticipate a delightful and restful visit. I see you've got Mr. Anstruther staying here. Anybody else?" "Oh, do you know Lord Snettisham?" Aunt Dahlia asked. "I've met him racing," I answered. "He's here, and Lady Snettisham." "And Bonzo, of course?" "Yes, and Thomas." "Uncle Thomas?" "No, he's in Scotland. Your cousin Thomas." "You don't mean Aunt Agatha's loathly son?" "Of course I do. How many cousin Thomases do you think you've got, fathead? Agatha has gone to Hamburg and planted the child on me." I was visibly agitated. "But, Aunt Dahlia, do you realize what you've taken on? Have you an inkling of the scourge you've introduced into your home? In the society of young Thomas, strong men quail. He is England's premier fiend in human shape. There's no devilry beyond his scope." "Well, that's what I've always gathered from the form book," agreed the relative. "But just now, curse him, he's behaving like something out of a Sunday school story. You see, poor old Mr. Anstruther is very frail these days, and when he found he was in the house containing 2 small boys, he acted promptly. He offered a prize of £5 to whichever behaved best during his stay. The consequence is that ever since, Thomas has had large white wings sprouting out of his shoulders." A shadow seemed to pass across her face. She appeared embittered. "Mercenary little brute," she said. "I never saw such a sickeningly well-behaved child in my life. It's enough to make one despair of human nature." I couldn't follow her. "But isn't that all to the good?" I asked. "No, it's not. I can't see why. Surely a smug, oily Thomas about the house is better than a Thomas raging hither and thither and being a menace to society. It stands to reason." "Doesn't stand to anything of the kind. You see, Bertie, this good conduct prize has made things a bit complex. There are wheels within wheels. The thing stirred Jane Snettisham's sporting blood to such an extent that she insisted on having a bet with me on the result." A great light shone upon me. I got what she was driving at. "Ah," I said, "now I follow. Now I see. Now I comprehend. She's betting on Thomas, isn't she?" "Yes, and naturally, knowing him, I thought the thing was in the bag." "Of course." I couldn't see myself losing. Heavens knows I have no illusions about my darling Bonzo. Bonzo is, and has been from birth, a pest. But to bet that he would nose out Thomas in a good conduct contest seemed to be simply money for jam. "Absolutely. When it comes to devilry, Bonzo is just a good ordinary selling plater, whereas Thomas is a classic yearling." "Exactly. I don't see what you have any cause to worry. Thomas can't last it. He's bound to crack." "Yes, but before that the mischief may be done." "Mischief?" "Yes, there's dirty work afoot, Bertie," said Aunt Dahlia gravely. "When I booked this bet, I reckoned without the hideous blackness of the Snettisham soul. Only yesterday it came to my knowledge that Jack Snettisham had been urging Bonzo to climb on the roof and boo down Mr. Anstruther's chimney." "No." "Yes. Mr. Anstruther is a rather frail, poor old fellow, and would have frightened him into a fit, on coming out of which his first action would have been to disqualify Bonzo and declare Thomas the winner by default." "But Bonzo did not boo?" "No," said Aunt Dahlia, and a mother's pride rang in her voice. "He firmly refused to boo. Mercifully, he's in love at the moment and has quite altered his nature. He scorned the tempter." "In love? What, with whom?" "Lillian Gish. We had an old film of hers at the Bijou Dream in the village a week ago, and Bonzo saw her for the first time. He came out with a pale, set face, and ever since had been trying to lead a finer, better life. So the peril was averted. That's good. But now it's my turn. You don't suppose I'm going to take a thing like that lying down, do you? Treat me right and I'm fairness itself, but if there's going to be any just nobbling of starters, they'll jolly well find I can play that game too. If this good conduct contest is to be run on rough lines, I can do my bit as well as anyone. Far too much hangs on the issue for me to handicap myself by remembering the lessons I learned at my mother's knee. Oh, lots of money involved? Much more than mere money. I've bet my chef Anatole against Jane Snickersham's kitchen maid. Great Scott! Uncle Thomas will have something to say if he comes back and finds Anatole gone. Oh, yes, and won't he say it? Pretty long odds. I mean, Anatole is famed far and wide as a hash-slinger without peer. Well, Jane Snickersham's kitchen maid is not to be sneezed at. She is very hot stuff, they tell me, and good kitchen maids nowadays are about as rare as original Holbeins. Besides, I had to give her a shade the better of the odds. She stood out for it. Well, anyway, to get back to what I was saying, if the opposition are going to place temptations in Bonzo's path, they shall jolly well be placed in Thomas's path, too, and plenty of them. So ring for Jeeves and let him get his brain working. But I haven't brought Jeeves. You haven't brought Jeeves? No, he always takes his holiday at this time of year. He's down at Bognor for the shrimping. Aunt Dahlia registered deep concern. I'll then send for him at once. What earthly use do you suppose you are without Jeeves, you poor ditherer? I drew myself up a trifle. In fact, if I recollect rightly, to my full height. Nobody has a greater respect for Jeeves than I have, but the Wooster pride was stung. Jeeves isn't the only one with brains, I said coolly. Leave this thing to me, Aunt Dahlia. By dinner-time tonight I shall hope to have a fully matured scheme to submit for your approval. If I can't thoroughly encompass this, Thomas, I'll eat my hat. About all you'll get to eat if Anatole leaves, said Aunt Dahlia, in a manner which I did not like to see. I was brooding pretty tensely as I left the presence. I've always had a suspicion that Aunt Dahlia, while invariably matey and bonhumous and seeming to take great pleasure in my society, has a lower opinion of my intelligence than I quite like. And too often it is their practice to address me as a fathead, and if I put forward any little thought or idea or fancy in her hearing, it's apt to be greeted with the affectionate but jarring guffaw. In our interview, she had hinted quite plainly that she considered me negligible in a crisis which, like the present one, called for an initiative and resource. It was my intention to show her how greatly she had underestimated me. To let you see the sort of fellow I really am, I got a ripe, excellent idea before I had gone halfway down the corridor. I examined it for the space of 1.5 cigarettes and could see no flaw in it, provided old Mr. Anstruther's notion of what constituted bad conduct squared with mine. The great thing on these occasions, as Jeeves will tell you, is to get a toehold on the psychology of the individual. Study the individual, you'll bring home the bacon. Now, I had been studying young Thomas for years, and I knew his psychology from caviar to nuts. He's one of those kids who never let the sun go down on their wrath, and if you know what I mean to say, do something to annoy or offend or upset this juvenile thug, and he'll proceed at the earliest possible opportunity to wreak a hideous vengeance upon you. Only the previous summer, for instance, it having been drawn to his attention that the man had reported him for smoking, he had marooned a cabinet minister on an island in the lake of Agatha's place in Hertfordshire, in the rain, mark you, and with no company but that of one of the nastiest-minded swans I've ever encountered. So now it seemed to me that a few well-chosen taunts or jibes, directed at his more sensitive points, must infallibly induce in this Thomas a frame of mind which would lead to his working sensational violence upon me. And if you wonder some that I was willing to sacrifice myself to this frightful extent in order to do Aunt Dahlia a bit of good, I can only say that we Woosters are like that. The one point that seemed to me to want a spot of cleaning up was this. Would old Mr. Anstruther consider an outrage perpetrated on the person of Bertram Wooster a crime sufficiently black to cause him to rule Thomas out of the race? Or would he just give a senile chuckle and mumble something about boys being boys? Because if the latter, the thing was off. I decided to have a word with the old boy, just to make sure. He was still in the smoking room, looking very frail over the morning's Times. I got to the point at once. "What ho, Mr. Anstruther," I said. "I don't like the way this American market is shaping," he said. "Don't like this strong bear movement." "No," I said. "Well, be that as it may, about this good conduct prize of yours." "Ah, yes. I don't quite understand. How are you doing the judging?" "Oh, no? Oh, it's very simple. I have a system of daily marks. At the beginning of each day I accord the two lads 20 marks apiece. These are subjected to withdrawal either in small or large quantities according to the magnitude of the offense. To take a simple example, shouting outside my bedroom in the early morning would involve a loss of 3 marks. Whistling, just 2. The penalty for a more serious lapse would be correspondingly greater. Before retiring to rest at night, I record the day's marks on my little book. Simple, but I think ingenious, Mr. Wooster." "Absolutely. So far, the result has been extremely gratifying. Neither of the little fellows has lost a single mark." "I see," I said. "Great work. How do you react to what I might call general moral turpitude?" "I beg your pardon?" "Well, I mean when the thing doesn't affect you personally. Suppose one of them did something to me, for instance, set a booby trap or something, or shall we say put a toad in my bed." He seemed shocked at the very idea. "I would certainly in such circumstances deprive the culprit of a full 10 marks. "Only 10? 15 then." 20 is a nice round number. "Well, possibly even 20. I have a peculiar horror of practical joking." "Oh, me too." You will not fail to advise me, Mr. Wooster, should such an outrage occur?" "You shall have the news before anyone," I assured him. And so, out into the garden, ranging to and fro in quest of young Thomas, I knew where I was now. Bertram's feet were on solid ground. I found him in the summer-house, reading an improving book. "Hello," he said, smiling a saint-like smile. This scourge of humanity was a chunky kid whom a too indulgent public had allowed to infest the country for a matter of 13 years. His nose was snub, his eyes green, his general aspect that of one studying to be a gangster. I'd never liked his looks much, and with a saint-like smile added, they became ghastly to a degree. I ran over in my mind a few assorted taunts. "Well, young Thomas," I said, "so there you are, getting as fat as a pig." Seemed as good an opening as any other. Experience has taught me that if there was a subject on which he was unlikely to accept persiflage in a spirit of amusing geniality, it was this matter of his bulging tum. On the last occasion when I had made a remark of this nature, he had replied to me, child though he was, in terms which I should have been proud to have in my own vocabulary. But now, though a wistful gleam did flit for a moment into his eyes, he merely smiled in a more saint-like manner. "Yes, I have been putting on a little weight," he said gently. "I must try to get a lot of exercise while I'm here. Won't you sit down, Bertie?" he asked, rising. "You must be tired after your journey. I'll get you a cushion. Have you cigarettes and matches? I could bring you some from the smoking room." It is not too much to say that I felt baffled. In spite of what Aunt Dahlia had told me, I don't think that until this moment I'd really believed there could be anything in the nature of a sensational change in this young plug-ugly's attitude towards his fellows. But now, hearing him talk as if he were a combination of Boy Scout and delivery wagon, I felt baffled. However, I stuck at it in the old bulldog way. "Are you still at that rotten kids' school of yours?" I asked. He might have been proof against jibes at his plumpness, but it seemed to me incredible that he could have sold himself for gold so completely as to lie down under taunts directed at his school. I was wrong. The money lust held him in its grip. He merely shook his head. "I left this term. I'm going to Cheltenham next term." "They wear mortarboards there, don't they?" "Yes." "With pink tassels?" "Yes." "What a priceless ass you'll look," I said, but without much hope, and I laughed heartily. "I expect I shall," he said, and laughed more heartily. Mortarboards. Ha ha! Pink tassels. Ha ha! I gave the thing up. Well, toof toof, I said moodily, and withdrew. A couple of days later, I realized that the virus had gone even deeper than I had thought. The kid was irremediably sorted. It was old Mr. Anstruther who sprang the bad news. "Oh, Mr. Wooster," he said, meeting me on the stairs. "You were good enough to express an interest in this little prize for good conduct which I am offering?" "Oh, yeah, huh?" "I explained to you my system of marking, I believe. Well, this morning I was impelled to vary it somewhat. The circumstances seemed to me to demand it. I happened to encounter our hostess's nephew, the boy Thomas, returning to the house, his aspect somewhat weary and, it appeared to me, and travel-stained. I inquired of him where he had been at that early hour. It was not yet breakfast time, and he replied that he had heard you mention overnight a regret that you omitted to order the Sporting Times to be sent to you before leaving London, and he'd walked all the way to the railway station, a distance of more than 3 miles, to procure it for you." He looked like two old Mr. Anstruthers, both flickering at the edges. "What?" "I can understand your emotion, Mr. Wooster," said the old boy. "I can appreciate it. It is indeed rarely that one encounters such unselfish kindliness in a lad of his age. So genuinely touched was I by his goodness of heart that I have deviated from my original system and awarded the little fellow a bonus of 15 marks. 15? On second thoughts, I shall make it 20. That, as you have yourself suggested, is a nice round number." He doddered away, and I bounded off to find Aunt Dahlia. "Aunt Dahlia," I said, "matters have taken a sinister turn." "You bet your Sunday spats they have," agreed Aunt Dahlia emphatically. "Do you know what happened just now? That crook Snettisham offered Bonzo 10 shillings if he would burst a paper bag behind Mr. Anstruther's chair at breakfast. Thank heaven, the love of a good woman triumphed again. My sweet Bonzo merely looked at him and walked away in a marked manner. But it just shows you what we're up against." "We're up against worse than that, Aunt Dahlia," I said, and told her what had happened. She was stunned, aghast, you might call it. "Thomas did that?" "Thomas in person." "Walked 6 miles to get you a paper?" 6 miles and a bit. Oh, the young hound! A blighter beyond question. Good heavens, Bertie, do you realize you may go on doing these acts of kindness daily, perhaps twice a day? Is there no way of stopping him?" "Not that I can think of. No, Aunt Dahlia. I must confess that Bertram is baffled." "Oh, there's only one thing to do. We must send for Jeeves." "And about time," said the relative cheerlessly. "You'd have been here from the start. Wire him this morning." End of episode. Another mess, and for Aunt Dahlia this time. Bertie did try to solve things, but he may have just made them worse. Luckily, Jeeves is on the way. Just a reminder, if you subscribe to my free newsletter at ravensview.substack.com, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. Plus, you can browse the various short stories and musings I have in there. If you enjoy this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, do leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack, and remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.